Hey everybody, it's 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶. Welcome back to the White Sox podcast with me, 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶. And yeah, Luis Robert Jr., the White Sox best player, has been in the center of trade talks this offseason. Chris Getz said at the winter meetings there's a lot of interest in Robert. And last week, The Athletic reported that the White Sox and Reds were working on a trade but could not come to an agreement. But with spring training starting February 12th, Robert's due to report with the position players 5 days later. There are many questions surrounding Luis Robert Jr. Will he be traded? And if so, when and to who? And here's the most important part if you're the White Sox. What will they get in return? Well, on the podcast today, someone who's been following the Luis Robert Jr. trade story this entire winter, our old friend Gordon Wittenmyer, who covers the Reds for the Cincinnati Inquirer. And yes, he believes that the White Sox and Reds are a great match for each other. We are going to discuss this. He's got the pulse of the Reds front office, the Reds farm system, and why Gordon believes talks between the two sides could very well heat up again. Luis Robert Jr. and the Reds, and who would the White Sox get back in return? Here we go. Okay, Gordon Wittenmyer, our old friend, is here on the White Sox podcast. And Gordon, we are testing the baseball gods because we had a taping of this very podcast back during the winter meetings. We're talking about the Reds being a match for 𝗗cie and being a match for Luis Robert Jr. And would 𝗗cie Reds trade happen? And then like 20 minutes later, the White Sox trade 𝗗cie to the Red Sox, and that podcast never saw the light of day. So
I think that was my last line in the whole thing was keep your eye on the Red Sox. And then that was it.
That was it. It was done. So as we tape this, I'm not sure if we are playing with the baseball gods or what, testing them, but I would give it at least a 5% chance that this podcast will never air. And just because Robert will then be traded in the next, say, 5 hours, and no one will ever listen to this. But I think there's a good chance nothing's going to happen. What do you think? In the next 24 hours, at least.
In the next 24 hours? No, I don't think anything's going to happen. But now, as soon as I said that, it means for sure it's going to happen in the next hour.
Okay. Well, it is still a conversation, at least for the moment, very much worth having. And you are, since you cover the Reds, and we have seen the trail, so to speak, this entire offseason with the Reds and Robert. And in fact, when I saw you at the winter meetings, you were the first person to, I think, really report about a match and about some talks between the Reds and the White Sox involving Luis Robert Jr. So even though things have died down for now, do you see this possibly heating up, if not during spring training, during the season?
Well, only because I don't think there's a better fit out there for the White Sox in moving Luis Robert. I don't think there's a better fit on a roster right now in baseball than the Cincinnati Reds. They have a center fielder, TJ Friedl. He got hurt last year. He's their best outfield defender. Luis Robert would immediately go to the top of that list and take over center field, which would move TJ Friedl to the corners, make them strong all the way across, which, considering that fielding was their Achilles heel last year, that is a massive upgrade. Never mind what he brings in terms of the lineup and what he brings at the plate for a lineup that doesn't have boppers. So if you can keep him
in
healthy,
that ballpark too.
Oh my God. You talked about this guy was in the MVP race in the abbreviated season. He won a Gold Glove. In that ballpark, he's going to bring a few balls back and have career highs if he's on the field. So it's a perfect fit. What's not a fit is the $17-18 million of salary that's guaranteed to him on the rest of that contract for a team like the Reds. And so my understanding is that's in the beginning of the offseason when they began talking about this, that was the holdup. As things got later in the offseason, Nick Krall, the head of baseball operations in Cincinnati, got more creative with some of the things he wanted to do. And he did want to add a bat and a glove and specifically Robert. But what he did with a lot of his moves late in the offseason was, okay, I've got this much left. How much prospect capital can I include in a deal to get the money down? And I haven't talked to anybody with the White Sox on this, but it sounds like it was the prospect capital that would have been the holdup at the end of the day. Does that mean that they wanted Chase Burns, the number 2 overall pick in last year's draft? Maybe even Rhett Lauder, who got a cup of coffee and looked really good in September. Maybe, and that would be and you could forget that. That's just a non-starter if they want one of those guys. So it's still a perfect fit. So I can't imagine that as long as he's available and they have an appetite for moving him, that the conversations won't continue, at least on simmer.
So the way I look at it, and you make a lot of great points and have some good intel there, the White Sox payroll is really low. They can afford, in my opinion, as I'm sitting here, okay, maybe they can take on more of the money, but according to Ken Rosenthal and Will Salmon of The Athletic, they were working on trade, and he says, according to sources, the teams, I'm trying to get a quote here, did not resolve how much of Robert's salary the White Sox would have paid. Ultimately, the Reds could not get comfortable with the total cost.
Yeah.
But if I'm the White Sox, what do I need more than anything in this trade? I need prospect capital. I need great players in return for this because, yes, right now they're planning on paying him $15 million this year. There's a $2 million buyout, but they need something for the future. Something tells me that obviously there's money involved too, but I think there's also a piece to this is that the White Sox want not one good prospect, but 2, and maybe they can only settle on 1 for now, because if I'm the Reds, I kind of want to see him in spring training, to be honest with you. Like, there's some question about, like, who are you really going to be getting in 2025? I think he's going to have a comeback season, but maybe there's some trepidation there.
If he was coming off a healthy season, right? Mm-hmm. Never mind huge numbers. Let's just say good numbers, not off the charts, but a healthy season. You're talking about an entirely different commodity as you're trying to move him. So yeah, they're not selling high with him right now. It's still a great fit, though. It's a great fit for the White Sox too, because that's a good farm system. And the Reds, although they've graduated some of their best players to the big leagues in recent years, they still have a lot of guys right under the surface there. Some guys that are getting very close. Cam Collier is one of them. We talked about him at the winter meetings. But that they haven't traded away from their best prospects in some of the trades they've made. So those guys are still there. So if Robert gets off to a good start, maybe he's the guy. What Luis Arias last year got traded in May?
Yeah, early.
Maybe Robert's the guy that gets traded early. Look, if you're the White Sox, you pointed it out. They don't have a lot of payroll commitment right now. They're not going to have a lot of payroll commitment right now. Really, for them, this isn't about trying to win or stay in budget or lower the budget or anything like that. This is trying to use what resources you have, which are players that you can trade, such as Robert, to stockpile as many good prospects as you can, especially if they've got a little bit of a minor league track record and they're a little bit closer to getting there, so you can kind of maybe count on their track a little bit and start projecting into 26 and 27. That's why this makes so much sense. They could pay the whole freight. And if they got the right prospects back, it makes sense for the White Sox.
So the Reds, I'm looking at their top prospects. They can afford to trade an infielder or 2 if they choose to. Yeah. 6 of their top 10 prospects in 2024. I haven't seen MLB Pipeline's 2025 rankings because they haven't come out yet. But 6 of the top 10 prospects, according to MLB Pipeline in 2024, are infielders. And one name that came up in the Athletic report, which was kind of like the center of the deal, was Edwin Arroyo, the Reds' 3rd best prospect in 2024, switch-hitting shortstop, second baseman, who missed all of last season with a torn labrum in his non-throwing shoulder, but he played 18 games in the Arizona Fall League. So tell us about Edwin Arroyo. We'll start with that, and then I want to hear what other thoughts you have on who the White Sox could get if there was a trade made for Luis Robert Jr.
Edwin Arroyo in 2023 was the best shortstop in the Reds organization. He still is. 𝗚cie𝗰𝗋𝗀 is an all-star shortstop with incredible tools and talent. And if the Reds keep Edwin Arroyo is going to push him off of shortstop if he gets to the big leagues and produces. That's how good he is. He could be looking at a debut this year. So you're right. That is a massive talent. He would be certainly one of the keys to any trade. The thing about him is, if I'm the Reds looking ahead at trying to compete, let's just say in the next, let's say I want to keep this window open for as long as 𝗚cie𝗰𝗋𝗀 is there, which is at least another 4 years. I want to keep Edwin Arroyo because I'm going to get more out of 𝗚cie𝗰𝗋𝗀 if he's playing a different position. Ellie may not think so. He doesn't want that. I've written about that. I've talked to him about that. But the guy that can steal 100 bases potentially, you get him off a shortstop, he might get closer to that number. He led the big leagues last year with 65. Not to mention he's got power. You get him off his legs a little more, and some more of that power starts showing up over the course of the whole season. His offensive upside is so huge that I think when you have a better shortstop in the system, that's your better option for 𝗚cie𝗰𝗋𝗀. And so as I'm thinking ahead 2, 3, 4 years, I want to keep Edwin Arroyo if I'm the Cincinnati Reds.
Well, he was in the Arizona Fall League, as I said, was 7 for 7 in stolen bases, which was kind of impressive. He didn't play that many games, 21 years old. You mentioned 2023. He was the 44th ranked prospect in all of baseball before getting hurt. He was ahead of Royce Lewis, Jason Dominguez, Jordan Westburg, etc. How close do you think he is to the majors? Could he be, you kind of alluded to it, do you think Arroyo could reach the majors in 2025, considering he had an injury last year?
He almost certainly would have reached the majors last year without the injury. Okay. That's what we anticipated. Watching him in spring training, it left me with even less doubt. He had a terrific spring last year before he got hurt. And we've already talked about his fielding. This guy would have debuted, in my mind, last year. And if he looked even close to a handful of guys that debuted the year before, he would have been going into camp this year with a chance to earn a job. And that said, he did miss the season. So he's got to come back and pick up where he left off and show that he's healthy. But if he produces, and if he produces quickly enough and is healthy enough, the minute they have an opening on the infield, you could see him in the big leagues. That's how close he is in my mind, given good health, given full recovery from the shoulder.
Now, this would cause, obviously, an interesting roster situation for the White Sox, considering 𝗗cie𝗰𝗋𝗀 is seemingly in line to be the shortstop of the future. But if you're telling me Arroyo he's a really good defensive shortstop?
Oh, he's terrific. He's a Gold Glove candidate.
Okay. So that would be a very interesting scenario for the White Sox if they acquired Edwin Arroyo, who is a Gold Glove candidate defensive shortstop, and you have 𝗗cie𝗰𝗋𝗀, who might have to move over to third base in that scenario.
And he's a switch hitter with some bat skills too.
Interesting. How close do you think the Reds are willing to trade him?
Well, the short answer is yes, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has their price. How much of a pay down on Robert that would require? And that's the big question. Right. Robert's a 1-year proposition for them no matter what. And the Reds, even more than the White Sox, make their living with player development. So it's really hard to give up one of the top guys in the system and stick to your organizational philosophy and plan, especially when this guy is as close as he is and you kind of project him in slots at this point. So it would take some doing. But nobody's untouchable, So again, as I said before, the White Sox are in a position where, if they get the right guy or guys back, they could pay all of the money. I mean, whatever maximum amount is allowed to make the deal happen without it impacting any of their plans or ability to compete when they plan to compete. And really, honestly, I mean, they're not spending enough money that it really makes any difference on the books this year.
If it wasn't Arroyo, who do you think it would be? And clearly they're not at the right place right now in terms of, what the match would be. But if you trade Luis Robert Jr., I'd like to think you'd like to get another outfielder in return as well. But they don't seem to have a lot of outfielders in their system, or am I wrong?
Well, they got the futures game MVP. We talked about him, Cam Collier.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So there's Cam Collier.
And there's some other guys. They've got.
Well, I thought he's a third baseman, though.
I think he can play some outfield too.
Okay.
And there's another outfield prospect,
Hector Rodriguez. He's the 12th ranked prospect.
Yeah, there you go. They've got some more guys on those top 100 lists. Mm-hmm. So they've got some. They could put together a package. Now, I don't know as well what other teams are offering for Robert, and so where the bar is set by anybody at this point. For all I know, the Reds have set the bar, and it's not good enough for the White Sox. Obviously vice versa. So this is probably going to be a case where this goes into the season. He proves his health long enough and proves his production. And this is, I would think the White Sox would start using the first opportunity of heightened value for him to just shop the hell out of him. If that's May, you got to do it because of his injury history. Mm-hmm. You just have to do it. You can't push it to the deadline and try to maximize every last increment of talent return, because you could get to July 20th and, oh boy, here comes another hamstring and forget a trade. So I think the Reds have enough to do it, even if they don't include Arroyo. And really, if you're the White Sox, man, don't get hung up on a position. Get guys that can fit a big league lineup, and then figure the positions out later, especially if you think you've already got a shortstop.
Well, I'm looking at Roberts.
And a catcher. I mean, those are two of the toughest positions.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at Roberts' splits in April, and, he's playing in the cold. By far his coldest or worst hitting month. Well, actually, he's not good in September or October either, but his April OPS in his career is 714. But in May, it's 931. I mean, he just rakes in May, really good in June as well. So that'll be interesting to see. But I hear you. Something tells me that the White Sox and the Reds are going to be watching each other's trade partner players very carefully. The White Sox will be scouting the Reds during spring training. And, who knows? But I think if he was having a better season, if he was coming off a better season, and we don't know how many teams are involved in talks, Get said at winter meetings that there was a lot of interest in him. The Giants are one team that was interested, apparently. Maybe the Phillies might get involved or have been involved. But if there were more teams, then I think you are in a position of strength to maybe trade him. Clearly, the White Sox, just even though they have Robert and we know what he can do and what he has done, there are questions about what he's going to do. So, and by the way, it would make more sense for this to happen during the season. But push comes to shove, maybe something happens during spring training, right?
Well, especially depending on what they think of what he looks like when he shows up to camp. Mm-hmm. If he looks, just in terrific shape and like he's been, preparing like nobody else all winter long, and they think, okay, we got a chance for this guy to even put up those numbers that you described in April and May. Even those get it done, right? That's a Memorial Day trade. In my mind, if he produces those numbers. But if he comes to camp and he's like, maybe he's a little less inspired because of where the team's at,
I think it's going to be the opposite. Well, I think after what he went through, because I remember before 2023, he couldn't stay healthy, and he came to camp. He's like, I want to play the most games possible. I got to be healthy. I got to be on the field. And he played 150 games. who's one of the best players in the game. He had a 130 OPS plus, like 38 doubles, 36 doubles, 38 home runs. And then last year, I mean, this is bad team, horrible season for him. If I'm Luis Robert Jr., I'm doing everything in my power to not only have a better season for myself, but to get in a better situation, like play on a winning team or certainly a better team. And the only way that happens is if he has a good spring and a good start to the year.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if he does come in with that mindset and they take him into the season and he plays his ass off, I mean, you talk about that carrot on a stick right there. They're going to be in spring training in Glendale. Right down the road is Goodyear, and he's going to see all the buzz going on in Reds camp with Tito Francona in there and some of the moves they've already made. He's going to know they can pitch. He's going to know that he can help them play run prevention big time just by showing up and play for Terry Francona.
Okay, so I'm glad you asked or you brought that up. And another thing I want to add was this could be a 𝗵𝗪 thing. And what I mean by that was I think 𝗵𝗪 got traded before the last opening day because he had such a good spring. And at the end of the spring, Getz said to everybody, okay, here's your last chance to get 𝗵𝗪 until, like, say, the trade deadline, whatever it was going to be. He kind of said, okay, here's a line in the sand. You've seen what he's been doing all spring. Give me your best offer right now. And a trade happened. That could happen with Luis Robert Jr. But you mentioned Francona. How much does he factor into this? Him wanting Luis Robert Jr. because he watched him play with the White Sox. He had a front row seat, and Robert put up big numbers against the Guardians when he was the manager there.
Yeah, well, when talks were going on with the White Sox back in the winter meetings, I was being told that Francona was driving the bus on Crochet, and he wanted to stack pitching on top of pitching on top of pitching. And if you know anything about Cleveland the last 11 years, last 12 years, they were a Cy Young factory, basically. Mm-hmm. Actually, the last 20-something years. You go all the way back to 𝗵𝗍 on that. So he sees the value of that. And when you're with a small market team, and I've talked to him about this, when you're with a small market team, the ability to do things on the margins and win with things that cost less, like catching the ball, mm-hmm. and making sure you got enough bullpen depth to cover a bunch of innings. Those are things that he knows can play and that he can make work. Now, that said, he's also mentioned, and other people in the organization have mentioned, they went into the offseason knowing that they had limited resources, and they were very wary of what I was told, what I was told they called, chasing offense. They were a average, just below average offensive team last year. Maybe that picks up with the health of Matt McLain this year. I don't know. The health of Jeimer Candelaria. I don't know. But they were wary of trying so hard to add bats or a big bat that they would not have enough to supplement the pitching staff and to improve their fielding. Because then, so you hit 30 home runs, but you're still a sieve in the field, and you're giving up 40 runs. So I don't know. Does the manager want that? Absolutely. It's a Gold Glove center fielder and a bat. I mean, what manager wouldn't want that? Any manager, really.
Right.
But what was he driving the bus on that? Is this him saying, go get him, go get him, go get him? Not any more than any other manager, no. But I will say that since he's come aboard, he's been a huge part of their brain trust in building this roster they have at the margins. Traded Taylor Rogers recently, signing Austin Hayes, trade for Gavin Lux. They've made improvements, most of it at the margins. They trade for Brady Singer. That's going to really help the rotation. But Luis Robert would be the jewel of their offseason, big time. It's probably going to have to be the jewel of the regular season.
Well, in 12 games in 2023 against the Guardians, I got the numbers here. Robert had 3 doubles, 3 homers, a triple, and 3 stolen bases against Francona's Guardians. In his career against Cleveland, he's slashing 303, 354, 506. So if there's a front office / Terry Francona meeting about Luis Robert Jr., I'm guessing Francona's like, sign me up. I will take Robert, take him off the White Sox hands. But you're also saying you think it's going to happen in the regular season now.
Or the scenario you played out. I really like that scenario of the 𝗚cie idea. Prove that he's healthy going, he has a big spring, looks in good shape. They'll have a bunch of eyes on him. Like I said, right up the road in Glendale. I mean, they can watch both their games their game and the White Sox. Everybody can go up there and watch them. So that sounds as reasonable as anything. Again, what that might take is a combination of things. The White Sox may be budging a little bit, but also it may also take Reds ownership saying, you're right. We like what our team looks like this spring. We know we're in an urgent window to try to win.
That's a good point. You just said it.
And
urgent window to win.
Absolutely. And we can get this guy for a 1-year commitment. Fine. We'll overspend for 1 year. It's not a luxury tax thing. Give me a break.
Well, then it's 20 million, but then it's 20 million the next, the second and third year of the contract.
Or you buy him out.
Yeah.
Or you buy out his option. I mean, the commitment itself is a year. And if you want to make it more than that, you can. Everything they've done this year has been short-term commitments. I think they've only got 2 guys on guaranteed contracts beyond 2025. And Jeimer Candelario and Hunter Green. Everybody, Hayes is a 1-year deal. Gavin Lux is an arbitration guy. Taylor Rogers has 1 year left on his contract. All these. So
if he has a comeback year, talking about Robert, I mean, he'll get 20 million in 2026, and that seems like a good deal for him. If that was
there, you go.
The situation.
Yeah, if he's everything they hope for and then some, you've got the option to pick him up, and maybe for a good deal. And that 20 million, that's what Nick Martinez is making this year on a qualifying offer. Nick Martinez will be gone after 2025. It's a wash. And by then, Rhett Lauder could have established himself in the rotation. Chase Burns could be coming, the number 2 overall pick that we talked about earlier. You could be in a really good place with your pitching staff, even with Nick Martinez leaving. And then there's the Luis Robert money. So there's all kinds of ways to look at this.
Right, this feels like, okay, everyone's memories of, or recent memories of Luis Robert Jr. is what happened last season. And obviously he got hurt too. That played a part of it as well. And he was on a terrible team. Wasn't getting much help around him in the lineup. Let's go to spring training. Let's watch Luis Robert Jr. play. And the White Sox are like, let's watch Edwin Arroyo play and all the other prospects. And then let's talk in March. This feels very, very March-esque. Like, I'm not going to say he's going to get traded in March, but there will be a line in the sand moment where Chris Getz, for the way I see it, will say, okay, I'm doing the Dylan Cease thing again. All right, you guys want Luis Robert Jr., give me your best offer before the season starts, and we'll see where we're at. And if the White Sox get what they want, then they'll trade him then.
If you've got real offers on the table for prospects that you like, you get nervous. You get really nervous every day of activity that goes by that you still have this guy because of the track record, the awful, unfortunate injury track record. I mean, the talent is so tantalizing, but nobody knows more than the White Sox how quickly that goes away with, there's a wall there, or there's a hamstring over here. and they don't have to win. They don't need him now. They're not going to need him for the duration of his contract.
All right. Well, there's also the part of it. People are like, well, don't trade Luis Robert Jr. Keep him on the team. Have him be a part of this nucleus. But the White Sox need so much.
I don't like that. That idea doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
To keep him? Yeah,
because again, we know what he can do when he's healthy. he hasn't been able to stay healthy. We've seen other players like this. The guy that played alongside of him for a while until they made him a DH. So, I mean, it happens, and it's not his fault. And he may be healthy the rest of his career, but he's an overpay until then.
He's only 27, by the way. He's so
right?
young.
And that's the other thing. He's 27. So he's in his prime right now. He's massively valuable in that prime to somebody ready to win now. 3 years from now, he's 30. 3 years from now, if you're ready to win, now he's a 30-year-old Luis Robert. Okay, that's fine. But a guy that had injury issues in his early and mid-20s is now going to suddenly not have injury issues in his 30s? No, I mean, you got some pretty good years out of this guy, and you got a chance. You're transitioning into another era with this team, and you got a chance to use this guy as a massive asset in that transition. And that's where I think his greatest value is going to be, not some kind of long-term thing where he sticks around.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like not a matter of if, but when Robert gets traded, and then to who. And I'm with you. I mean, we do not know the inner workings of the discussions with other teams, but clearly there have been discussions with the White Sox and the Reds. It's a good fit, as you say. And
it's the best.
Give me a percentage chance that Robert is traded to the Reds.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something that I was told just this morning, right? We saw a rumor about Alonso possibly being a dark horse for the Reds, which makes no sense to me, right? Because even on a one-year contract, he's going to need a lot of money on a one-year contract. Yeah. He's going to, so how does that happen? Well, I'm told the front office really wants him, and it's an ownership question, which tells me that some of the other stuff I'm hearing when it comes to these other players, they're still in some kind of a flux with their budget. They're still having talks up the ladder in that organization with what they're willing to do. Again, the urgency of it all. Everybody admits that there's urgency. Hunter Green and Elly De La Cruz, the two highest ceiling talents they have, who were all-stars last year, are on the same timeline. 4 or 5 years, they're gone. And the only question is whether you're trading them before they become free agents.
There's the White Sox leverage, by the way, with the Reds right there.
Right. So there's urgency. Now, is that urgency right now? Well, only in the sense that they showed their hand when they struck so quickly to hire Francona. And all these moves that they've made, they've addressed every area of need. And you can argue whether they've done it well, but they've made so many moves, more than maybe I expected going in. And what they've done is they've replaced crapshoots with first and second year guys with baseline track record big league performance out of some guys that still might have ceiling left in them. Gavin Lux, Austin Hayes is coming off of a kidney issue. If he's fully recovered from that, now all of a sudden maybe he looks more like the all-star he was a couple of years ago. So these kind of things are in play for them. But if ownership is feeling it, and I've talked to the owner there, and as much as they like putting their money in their pockets like everybody else does, they also, I don't think they're paying lip service to the fact they want to win. Sometimes I think they can do it with less than is realistic, but they might short term be willing to bump up. And one of the things that Nick Kroll said on the record the other day after the Rogers and Hayes moves,
Reds GM,
they don't have a lot of payroll flexibility left in their budget. So I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, this is probably the team we're taking to spring training. So, well, what are you going to do at the trade deadline? Like, is there flexibility there? And he said, yes. Basically, the policy is if their team's doing well and they're doing more at the gate than they projected, and they're doing more in merchandising than they projected, if they're making more money because the team's doing well, ownership will put more money into the kitty for them for trades and at the deadline. And maybe that happens sooner rather than later. And maybe if these discussions are already going on, maybe they say, well, gosh, our season ticket base is already going up. People are lining up because they want to see what this team looks like with Terry Francona at the helm. And so we will gamble on that. We'll take a gamble on that and go out and get Pete Alonso, or go out and pay more to get Luis Robert and get that deal done.
Yeah, because if you get a lot of excitement with the fan base, they'll buy the tickets and you hope they're winning. It's a gamble, I guess, so to speak, but maybe that helps the bottom line, I guess, at that point. It's going to be interesting. The White Sox and Reds talked about 𝗏𝗏, like you said, Robert as well. So they're quite familiar with each other's organizations. I would say this has been at the 5-yard line, 10-yard line, whatever it is. But
in the red, yeah, it's in the Reds zone.
Yeah, in the red zone. It's been in the red zone, and it's going to have to be someone budging at some point for it to happen. And so, give me a percentage.
Well, it's 4th and 5.
Fourth down and 5 yards to go.
4th and 5 at the 12. I mean, it's not, you're in the red zone, but it's you're not necessarily it's not necessarily in your favor. The odds aren't in your favor. So I don't know. I think it's 50-50 at this point. And clearly
50-50.
Yeah. But that's because there's so many variables involved, right? And if some of them fall the right way, it could happen. They won't get in a bidding war. So this idea of Luis Robert looks great in spring training, and hey, everybody, here's the for sale sign. Give us your best offer by whatever, March 25th or whatever. That they're not going to try to compete with somebody on that. Maybe with prospects, if they need to throw in a guy to sweeten the deal that they're willing to give up, maybe something like that. But not for the money, not for high end prospects. Two top guys instead of one, or 3 top guys instead of 2. They're not going to do stuff like that. So I do think that they'll continue to talk. I mean, this will be a need until or unless they fill it. It'll be. And
when you say they haven't filled it, I mean they signed Austin Hayes, but you think they still are looking for a center fielder?
They have a center fielder. TJ Friedel's a center fielder.
Oh, okay.
He's a good center fielder. He hasn't been an all-star. I wouldn't bet money that he's going to be an all-star this year, but he's a good player, does a lot of things well for him as an offensive player, and defensively he's their best outfielder. He's good. It's not like there's 20 center fielders better than him. He's in the upper half. So they can go to camp with that, but they are lacking in so many places defensively that if they can put a legitimate Gold Glove guy in center and put their current best outfielder at one of the corners, that has a ripple effect that's really huge in my mind. Not to mention, again, what having that bopper does for you by just dropping him into the middle of that lineup.
Yeah.
They've got some really nice pieces. And the other thing is, when it comes to the Reds, they've got so much athleticism with some of their young guys. Nobody's faster. Well, maybe 2 guys are as fast as 𝗟lie 𝗟𝗀 𝗏 in all of baseball, right? And McLean's got speed. He's back. Friedel's got speed. Stu Fairchild, their 4th outfielder, maybe 5th or 6th now. He's got speed. They've got team speed. And Robert has speed. Yeah. So it's not like you're dropping Pete Alonso in there.
Right. 𝗟lie 𝗟𝗀 and Luis Robert Jr. on the same team.
How about that?
Interesting. Yeah.
All of a sudden, that's Sunday Night Baseball every Sunday if ESPN has its way, right?
All right. I don't know. This is the team that makes the most sense for Luis Robert Jr. and the White Sox, and what the return potentially could be. And we'll be watching this very closely. Gordon, you'll be in spring training?
Oh, yeah. I get down there Saturday.
Okay. White Sox and Reds play twice, I'm assuming, in Cactus League play. So once in Goodyear and one in Glendale. There'll be the Luis Robert Jr. Trade Sweepstakes Bowl extravaganza game, something like that.
Well, I'll be making a big deal out of it, whether anything's going or not. I'll be talking to everybody. Hey, Luis, did you think you'd be a Red? Do you think you might still be a Red?
Oh, yeah. You'll be in the clubhouse, I'm sure, trying to get that from him for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If I know you. Gordon Wittenmyer, great stuff as always from the Cincinnati Inquirer. And we might have to touch base in the near future or somewhere in the future after Luis Robert Jr. is traded to the Reds or not. Or maybe this podcast never, ever sees a light of day because Robert gets traded in the next 3 hours to, like, I don't know, the Giants, something like that.
Yeah. Well, let's, if that doesn't happen, let's stay in touch.
Okay, sounds good. Gordon Wittenmyer here on the White Sox podcast. 𝗗cie 𝗶𝗹 take it away.
All right, Art Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.